This is Allison Williams here, your host of Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. I am Allison Williams, the owner and founder of Williams Law Group here, a family law firm in Short Hills, New Jersey. And as you know, for those of you that are regulars, we are just starting our show. I'm going to go ahead and share our show on Facebook. So for those of you that are out there and listening, I ask that you please do the same so that your friends and contacts can see what we're talking about tonight, because tonight's topic is really, really great. So for those of you that are not familiar with the show, let me just give you a little overview. Moving Families Forward is a show all about families. And we as a family law firm help families in a multitude of different ways deal with issues that are personal to them regarding their marriage, their emotional health, their physical health, their children's health, their family systems and structures. And we help people really transition their family from one state to another. That's how I like to talk about the process of divorce. So a lot of people have said that divorce has always been a destructive process, meaning that when you get divorced, you break apart your bonds of matrimony. You will recast your friends, your family, you lose your house, you lose your neighborhood, you lose all that you knew before. And I really don't like to have our clients think about it that way, because really divorce is a process of transitioning your family to something different. It may not be what you knew before, but it doesn't have to be something that's worse. In fact, in many times it can be something that's fundamentally healthier and better for you. So we help families through that process here at the law firm. And one of the things that I have always been very grateful for is having a multitude of professionals that give advice to our clients and help them through the process the same way that we do, but in their own discipline. So we have been bringing this show into life really to help our clients get connected with resources that can make them happier, healthier, and enjoy their lives and their families in a much more a full way. So for that, tonight we are having one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite issues to talk about, which is children and parenting. And I was quite blessed recently to learn about this idea of a parenting coach. So I am a business coach. I help lawyers build law firms. That's something separate and apart from Williams Law Group, but it's something I'm very excited about. And through the process of being a business coach, I've encountered a lot of coaches. But it was actually through the Williams Law Group that we got the joy of meeting Lisa DiSciullo, who is our guest for tonight. So I'm going to introduce Lisa, and then we're going to jump right in because she has a lot of great content for you guys tonight about parenting and being a happier, healthier, better parent for yourself and for your kids. So Lisa DiSciullo has been a successful lifelong educator and trainer in many capacities, from computer communications and relationship skills in Fortune 500 companies to respectful ways for parents to teach and develop their children, not to mention being a parent herself of 3 children that she was able to help grow into capable, positive, independent, and resourceful adults. So Lisa, thank you so much for being on our show tonight, and I want to welcome you to Moving Families Forward.
Thank you very much for having me, Allison. I appreciate it.
So again, as I told everyone, Lisa is a parenting coach, and I want to just kind of kick off tonight by asking, I'm not at all familiar with that discipline. It's not something that I ever encountered before meeting Lisa. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work of being a parenting coach?
Okay. All right. So my kids are in their 20s, 24, 26, and 28, and they are launched. They are educated. They have jobs. They're in romantic relationships. And most importantly, they are off the family payroll. So they are independent and out there in the world. So I'm very pleased with where they are now, but it wasn't always that way. 16 years ago, we were a frazzled, chaotic family. We couldn't get out of the house on time. We were yelling and screaming and fighting over homework and chores, and there was just a lot of frustration. And right around that time, one of my children was struggling academically in school, and the teachers recommended we go in for the whole battery of tests. And when they came back and they gave me the results and the recommendations of what to do for him, I said, that's great. Now I know what to do for him, but what can you do for me? Because I feel like a failure as a parent. All I ever do is yell and scream, and they don't do what I tell them to anyway. So they pointed me to the Parent Encouragement Program, which is a nonprofit in the Washington, D.C. area, and all they do is parenting classes. So I started taking parenting classes, and it absolutely changed our family and changed our lives. Two things happened. One was I got a better perspective on what my job was as a parent, what my job is as a parent. And then I also got some specific tools of what I could say, how I could say it, how I could develop better relationships with my kids. So once I took every class they had, I became a trainer, I taught for them, and then came to New Jersey. And in the meantime, I also became a life coach. So I really do two things, workshops and classes, as well as private coaching.
Wow. So, I mean, it sounds like, you really became the teacher from being the student. So you absorbed all
Right.
this information and now you're sharing it with others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think that's phenomenal. And I think, first of all, I want to applaud you for being so candid and clear with people about the fact that you went through this yourself, because
Mhm.
there are so many clients that I encounter here at the law firm where there's a great deal of shame around not knowing how to parent, because of course we know there's no manual and every
Mhm.
child is an individual, but there are some basic things that we think are good things and bad things about parenting that people are expected to do. But if you're doing something like yelling and screaming at your kids, while that might be common, it might not necessarily be what people think of as the right thing to do, but you're at your wit's end, and there really is no support for that. There's always the child is prioritized as being supreme over the parent, and it's a really, really hard issue for parents to deal with. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I want to ask you a little bit about challenges that parents are facing today. Can you talk to us about what you see as kind of the big issues that parents are grappling with when they come to see you?
Yes. I mean, one of the biggest things that parents talk to me about is technology. How do I control the screen time? And how do I make sure they're not on their phones all the time? And how do I get them to talk to me instead of ignoring me and staring at their phone or the TV or the tablet or the laptop or whatever? And technology is obviously here to stay. It has, this really the millennials are the first generation that were raised on technology. So many of the parents weren't raised on it. So, don't even really get it. But really what it is it's a change in the way we communicate. And kind of what has come out of that is it's made our lives faster paced. We expect things immediately. We have a lot less time because we're constantly in a rush. We're hurrying our children. It's in our area, as you know, in the Northeast, we live in an expensive place to live. So there are many
Absolutely.
two-income households. So parents are not there and available to children. And we've kind of lost sight of some of our family values, and then we don't have time to actually think about teaching that to our children. So from technology comes a whole host of challenges for parents, and it's something that really even the parenting experts sometimes are challenged with. How do we figure this out? Because technology is still a relatively new thing.
Yeah. Well, technology is definitely one of those issues that not only parents grapple with. I think it's really a societal issue that we haven't quite wrapped our minds around. If you think about the time that it took for our culture to come up with the computer, and then think about from the time that we created the computer to creating the smartphone, the time was cut in half. And
Right.
so we're innovating at a much faster rate now, and our brains are adapting to that. But that's not something that, of course, parents are necessarily thinking to do. So we have had some people join the live. I want to just acknowledge that Patty Kanzler is on the line. She was noting that she loves your classes. So you mentioned earlier that you teach parenting classes, which I think is phenomenal. We have Beatrix Bijou on, and she's noting how important it is because a lot of people don't know how to co-parent, which is something we're going to talk about.
Okay.
And we have Monica McCauley on the line who notes that you're fabulous and that she's taken so many of your classes that have been life changing for her family. So, for those of you that are just joining us now, you are watching Williams Law Group, Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. And tonight's guest is Lisa DiSciullo, who is a parenting coach and is talking to us about strategies for happy and healthy parenting. And so For those of you that are just coming to the show, please like, comment, and share. Let us know any questions that you have. You're happy to have this great resource available to you, and you can ask questions throughout the live. You can also share this with your friends and family so that they can get the benefit of Mr. DiSciullo's great resources and information as well. So, Lisa, I just want to now shift and ask you about parenting evolution because, every generation looks back and says, oh, things have changed so much from when I was a kid, or, I look back on the good old days. And, sometimes those good old days weren't so good. But notwithstanding that, we have this nostalgia that comes when we talk about how things used to be in our childhood. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how parenting has changed and why the things that we did to parent kids, one generation ago, two generations ago, is really just not applicable anymore?
Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting the time that we're in because things have shifted almost within our lifetimes, or maybe the generation before. So for generations and generations, there were groups of people that had power over other people. So the lords of the lands had power over the peasants, and historically, men have had power over women. And in the work world, bosses had power over the workers. And in the family, parents had power over children. And the tools that they used and the way that these groups utilized their power, or the tools that they used to maintain the power over those other groups were, through, punishment and rewards, and, maybe threats or bribes, or ways that they were kind of keeping the people at bay, if you will. And if you talk to many parents these days and you say, oh, when you were a little kid, did you behave yourself and did you listen to your parents? Most of them will say, yeah, I did. And I say, why? And they say, because if I didn't, something would happen. It's kind of, or else.
Right. The shoe, the ruler, the belt.
Exactly. And ruler that's a great word to be using, because these people in power, these positions of power, were ruling over others. Well, in the last 150 years, and in this country, we've had a number of movements that have moved us more toward equality and has shifted this power. So we had between the Emancipation Proclamation, the freeing of the slaves, we had the women's movement, the women getting the right to vote, the unions that changed the workplace. And then in the 1960s, the big movement, the civil rights movement. And when we still continually see, same-sex marriage, equal rights really for everybody. And it just keeps going now. So what's happened is this idea of power over others is no longer applicable. And so things have really shifted. Used to be that, dad would go out to work and then he would come home and he'd say to mom, jump. And she'd jump and get his slippers and his newspaper. And then she'd turn to the kids and say, jump. And then they would do their homework and do the things they needed to do. But now, dad comes home from work, or my mom comes home from work, or the partner comes home from work and says, jump. And the other one says, excuse me, we're equal here. And then the kids are really doing the same. So this idea of people having power over others has really shifted. So the tools that were used then, which was, do it or you don't get any dessert after dinner, or, do it now, or the belt or the ruler or whatever, there will be something taken away or some punishment inflicted, just isn't working. So kids are pushing back. So we need a new way of parenting. And the way of parenting that we need is, rather than an authoritarian, or, there could be a permissive household too. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But instead of this authoritarian, people looking, or parents looking over the children, what's happening is we really need leaders in our family, leaders that help develop the children into, growing and learning and becoming independent and resourceful. And so we need a new way of parenting.
Definitely. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because when you talk about this idea of power and the power dynamic, I mean, one of the things that I think is pretty amazing is that now we have a great deal of respect for the idea of an individual having a voice and having the right to express themselves. But with children, as they are still developing, they don't necessarily yet know the social mores of how to communicate, how to express themselves. And I think one of the great challenges that I see in our firm when we start looking at parents that are accused of child abuse and neglect is not that they actually harmed their child, but the child is placed at risk of harm. That's one of the large categories of child neglect that we see pled. It's oftentimes because of this idea that I am the parent and I am supposed to be able to tell you what to do and you are expected to obey. And if you don't, what do? I punish you. But
Mhm.
when you start looking at the way that social work looks at parenting styles now, there really is a shift away from that. And parents are not told that or taught that. And so, even some of the things that your parents did to you that you thought were perfectly expected because that's how adults treated children, now it's been demonized as something unhealthy. I mean, how are you helping people deal with that transition of really thinking about their role as a parent as not being one of ruler, controller, director of the behavior of the child, but really having a conversation with someone that may yet not understand how to converse.
Yeah, so it's the kind of the core of all of it is respecting them as little people, in whatever developmental phase that they're in. All of the programs that I do and the coaching that I do is based on Adlerian psychology, the psychology of Alfred Adler.
Mhm.
And one of the premises in his psychology is that the goal of all human behavior is the desire to belong to the group, to be valued by the group, to want to contribute. And that's for adults and children. And the first group that our children are born into is the family. And so as parents, we can kind of teach them and train them ways to positively belong in the group. And part of belonging is sharing in the things that go on in the household, sharing in the work of the household, taking care of themselves and being independent. And children as young as 3 years old start saying, me do it, me do it. And what do? We say, oh no, you're too little, we'll do it for you, and, but if we can find ways, from the get go and even later on, it's never too late, to allow them to contribute and then to also note to them the value that we see from their contributions, it totally shifts that so that they start to learn what can they contribute, and how that's valued. And they start to learn, kind of the social mores, and we're training them in that.
Yeah, that's
Does
a
that answer
great
it? Yeah.
answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And thank you for
Yeah.
that. So, for those of you that are just joining us tonight, this is Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. I am your host, Allison Williams, the owner of the law firm Williams Law Group. And tonight's guest is Lisa DiSciullo. She is the owner and founder of Parenting Matters. And Lisa has been a successful lifelong educator and trainer in many capacities, including her role working with Fortune 500 companies on relationship and communication skills, as well as teaching respectful ways for parents to teach their children and develop them into happy, healthy adults. She is the mother of three and had her own struggles with parenting, which she shared with us earlier. So if you haven't actually been here for all of that, I please welcome you to go back and hear that because it was really insightful for us to see that she really became the expert in this as a result of her own life challenges as a parent. So um, I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you have any questions, Lisa DiSciullo is here and she's available to answer your questions about parenting. And if I don't have any questions, I'm going to just shift now to our next topic, which is about parenting styles. So you mentioned earlier this idea about having a very authoritative parenting style. And I think some of us have probably heard that before. But can you talk to us about different parenting styles, what they are, what they look like, what's recommended, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for generations, the one that I described, authoritarian style or autocratic style, is kind of this: you will do it my way because I'm the boss, I'm the parent, I'm in charge here, and what I say goes. That kind of because I said so attitude. And what we see from children that are brought up in a pure autocratic household is they tend to be rebellious, or just resigned to the fact that they will always be powerless and somebody will always have power over them. So they become a little more robotic. They just tell me what to do and I'll do it, but powerless in who they are. And it's not a style that works these days. On the other end of the spectrum, and it's interesting historically that after World War II, we saw a big shift because the world saw what an autocratic ruler could do, and as a result, said we can't train our kids to just follow instructions blindly because look what can happen. So the parenting experts went to the other extreme, and they went to permissive parenting, which was, the kids will figure it out. Just let them be creative. The problem with that style is it caused a lot of resentment because the kids kind of had the power in the household, and the parents were depending on them to make decisions, but they didn't have life experience to make good decisions.
Right.
So that doesn't really work either. And we see both of these parenting styles, at least people that come to my classes, I see both of them. And sometimes it's a mixture, or going from one end of the spectrum to the other in a matter of minutes. But the third parenting style, which is what I teach and really, based on on Adlerian psychology, is what we call the democratic style, which doesn't have anything to do with any political party. It's really based on equality, that everybody gets a say, not everybody gets their way, but it's an inclusive way of being firm, like the autocratic style, and being friendly, like the permissive style. And so it's about having limits and giving some freedom within the limits and communicating that in a respectful way. And as I could say, my experience personally and the experience for the hundreds and hundreds of parents that I've worked with is that it works. And sometimes it's very small shifts in the way you're communicating and, kind of adopting new tools can get you really a very valuable result. And again, improve your relationships.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's kind of the whole purpose, is to get to that point where you're actually having a pleasant relationship with your child, where you're in control of whatever process you're going to use for parenting your child, as opposed to just winging it as you go and using what was used on you. Mm-hmm. But I would imagine, since you mentioned earlier, and for anyone that wasn't here earlier, I will note again that we're talking to Lisa DiSciullo. Lisa is a parenting coach, but she mentioned earlier that she also had life coach training. So I would imagine you also have a lot of experience in helping parents kind of break down that ego, that sense of entitlement that a lot of them have when they start to challenge this question of, why should I? We have a lot of the shoulds, and I always tell people you can should all over your life, but it's not necessarily going to get you what you want, right? If you have a parent that's really fixated on the idea that, this is how my parents raised me, right? I had to be the obedient one. And then I grew up, and now that I'm the parent, I feel entitled to be able to direct my household, instruct the rules of the household, expect compliance. How do you work with someone through that challenge of having a child who is now entitled to, or that you're trying to instill in them a sense of democracy where they have a say, not necessarily their way, but a say? How do you deal with that?
So, yeah, this idea of being entitled is very often part of this permissive parenting style, and it's almost a defense mechanism in a way, because I believe, and I've seen it in action many times, is that they want to be valued for their contribution, and when they're not contributing anything, then they're getting more discouraged. So the transition is really around encouraging them, communicating their value, communicating their contribution. It's interesting. My kids are millennials, which is kind of the entitled, the entitled generation, I guess. And
allegedly.
Allegedly. And I see them and I see their friends, and I see that, children that are brought up in a household where they can contribute, where they're expected to be part of the family and part of the team. And they're kind of brought in that they're one of us because they're contributing, really have a totally different attitude. And it's really more about hard work and striving and, wanting to become all they can be. versus the teenagers that are either being pampered, everything's done for them, which is actually very discouraging, because what it's communicating from the parent is, I don't really think you're capable of doing it, so I need to do it for you. Or potentially neglected, or the parent is absent. Both very discouraging. So when sometimes parents come to me with teenagers that are really in a discouraged place, and really what it takes, it's like any behavior change. It's kind of like if you want to lose weight or if you want to get fit, you have to make a decision that you're going to do it, be committed, and take some small steps. And each small step gets you closer. And as you know, being a business coach, I mean, that's really what coaching is about too, is that I'm your partner in this journey of trying to reach a different goal than the goal that you're on track to.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to make a quick note that you have a comment. Again, you have a raving fan in Monica McCauley. She notes that she thanks us for spotlighting you, because she notes that she encourages anyone who's struggling with parenting to attend one of your free seminars, and that it's a great introduction to some of what you have to offer. The classes are specific to age groups, and with some that focus on issues with small children, and others that specifically focus on parenting teens and tweens. And I can only imagine what that is like for someone, because having a teen and a tween, or a tween in a household, has got to be one of the greatest struggles. My best friend, Amy Coors, is on the line, and she's watching. And Amy has both the joy of having a toddler, as well as having a teenage daughter. And I said to her, "What on earth possessed you? You were almost over the finish line with Madison, her daughter, and now she's got a toddler." And so having a teenage daughter and a toddler son, I'm like, okay, you got two kids at the worst time for both genders, and you got them in the same household.
Right.
But I'm joking about that somewhat tongue in cheek. I note that Monica's comment is a very well placed one, that Lisa DiSciullo offers classes that are specific to age groups, and that is very important, because techniques that work on a teen are obviously not what you would use or age appropriate for a toddler.
Right.
So very good to note. You also have Dory Eldridge on the line. Dory, thank you for piping in, and she notes that she wants to thank us for having this conversation. And she asked the question of you, Lisa: what if I've been permissive but want to transition to Democratic? Is there a way to do this smoothly without a lot of drama? She has a 14-year-old daughter. So can you speak to that and answer that for Dory?
Absolutely. Really, the first step is kind of recognizing that you've been permissive, and what the results of that has been, and then setting the goal to be a little firmer, and still maintain the friendliness, if you will. So it's really about drawing boundaries and doing it in a way that's considered fair by the teen also. So, I mean, teens, they learn how to debate in school. They learn all this stuff outside of our family, and we just need to practice some of that in our family. So it's about clearly communicating, honestly communicating, being very, very clear about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So, for instance, and I don't know Dory's daughter, but, if your daughter's going out dressed what you consider inappropriately, you can say, well, first of all, I would, question when they bought those clothes, was there any conversation about the clothes? But, I'm not really willing to have you go to grandma's 80th birthday party, in that skirt, if they're, talking about coming home at 12 o'clock and 11 o'clock is really kind of your limit, you can say, tonight I'm not willing to have you come home at that time. We can talk about, renegotiating your curfew at another time, but for tonight, that's what it is. So it's really about drawing some of those limits, and then also understanding it from their perspective. Where are they coming from? And having honest conversations about that.
Yeah.
I hope that answered it. Yeah.
I think that did.
Yeah.
And Dory, if you need a follow up, just let us know. I will note that Amy did chime in to contradict me because that's what she does in our friendship. To note that sometimes toddlers and teens are more alike than different,
Yeah.
and that's very true. You know, sometimes the bullheadedness comes at whatever age it is because it's in the individual.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about this issue of style because people may say my preference is to have a democratic style and my spouse may have a very permissive style, or perhaps we are looking at options because we want to have a child, we're creating our family and we want to do the right thing and we're trying to figure out what works best, right?
Right.
So Dory did note, by the way, Lisa, that your question, that you did answer the question, so thank you for that,
Thank
and
you.
thank you,
Thank you,
Dory,
Dory.
for tuning in.
Yeah.
But so I would just really, I would be curious to know, like, what style is, quote, the best style? Is there a best style? And what tips do you have for a parent who's in that style? What do you do to accomplish the kind of golden standard of parenting style?
Okay. So it really comes down to what your goals are. And most people, when I ask them, and in our first class, we say, what characteristics would you like your child to have by the time they're 18 and they fly the nest, And we even extend it. What characteristics would you like them to have when they're 35? And they say things like independent, resilient, strong, fulfilled, being a hard worker, financially astute to manage their finances. There's a whole big long list. And if your goals are really a goal of independence and resilience, which is the ability to be successful and to deal with failure and deal with the journey of life, this idea of democratic parenting is firm and friendly. So it's giving them the guidance. Like, as you pointed out before, they don't have life experience. So we need to be training them in everything, and then giving them some responsibility and some opportunity to try it out and practice and make mistakes. And when they do, not be, down in the dumps with them, like, oh my gosh, that was such a failure, but talk about, what was the learning from that? How could you adjust that next time? And support them that, they might be feeling disappointed, but disappointment is a very healthy feeling, and it's okay to be disappointed sometimes. And usually that makes people work harder the next time. So it's really, the democratic style is really about supporting the journey of life so that you're not straightening out the road so that they can race through life, but you're equipping them to deal with the curves and the hills and the journey of life.
That is such a perfect analogy by saying you're not straightening out the road. Because I think so many parents really struggle with this idea of wanting their child's life to be easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want their child to have all the benefits that they didn't have. They want to, if they have more resources, then they want to share more resources with their child. If they have more time, they want to give more time to their child. And they're kind of pouring in to kind of create this healthy experience. But of course, as we know, no matter how good a parent you are, life is going to happen and your child is going to live through it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't help them come up with coping strategies to deal with some of the stuff of life, they're not necessarily going to sail through zoom ahead. They're probably just going to race straight ahead until they collapse flat on the ground.
Right.
Um, for those of you that are just joining the show, I want to just again note this is Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. I am the owner of Williams Law Group, Allison Williams, and I am your host for this evening. And we are talking to parenting coach Lisa DiSciullo. And Lisa owns the company Parenting Matters. I would note that Lisa is a successful lifelong educator and trainer in many capacities. She's worked with Fortune 500 companies on communication, and relationship skills. And she has also been a teacher and a trainer and a life coach, helping people to come up with respectful ways for parents to teach and develop their children into healthy adults. And she had that experience as a parent of 3 children who are now all capable, positive, independent, and resourceful adults. And that's no small feat, given what we've gone through today. So we've covered a lot of different topics. For those of you that are getting value out of today's show, please share the love, share the like. Let me know how you feel about the show. Drop some comments for us. Please, by all means, ask questions. You've got a great resource here with Lisa. knowing that she has had experience in helping people both by teaching parenting classes as well as being a coach and helping people develop strategies for that right style of parenting. So, Lisa, I want to ask you a question that kind of came to mind when you were speaking earlier about this idea of shift in power and how once upon a time the authority giving instruction to the lesser person in the dynamic was the way that parenting was conceptualized. You know, one at the top and one at the bottom. The parent tells the child, and that is what it is. And now children are, we like to say, empowered
Mhm.
to use their voice, express their wishes, and engage with parents. And I know that that is a struggle for a lot of parents. They really have difficulty with that. And sometimes there's just this idea of giving in, right? You can't win every battle, so I'll just let them have something. Are there any risks associated with maybe deviating from adopting a style where a child is constantly told what to do and then kind of shifting into, okay, fine, I'll just let you have it because I can't take it anymore with your yelling and screaming and whatever? Because I've seen a lot of people do that, and it's had some consequences. I just like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's when I talk about the shift of power and children being empowered, it doesn't necessarily mean giving in to them so that they can just do whatever they want. That's permissive parenting that I was talking about before. But what it could look like, just as an example, is, when you're getting ready to go to school and you've got to get out the door and maybe your time's a little tight, instead of saying, get your backpack, get your shoes on, come on, let's go, let's hurry, and directing them what to do, you could simply say, it's time to go. What do you need to do to get ready? To engage them in thinking about, how do I care for myself, rather than how do I just follow instructions of this power, this powerful person. And so, I mean, that's a very simple example, but when you think of everything that happens in a household, in the life of a child, when they have the opportunity to start making those seemingly small decisions, it gives them power. Um, it's also part of encouragement as well. So when they, come home and they're like, oh, I have a book report and it's such a long book, if you as a parent can just say, I've seen you have very difficult assignments before and you worked hard at it and you handled it. You've done this before. I know you can do it again this time. I believe in you. That's again giving them some power to take control over what they're going to do, over really what is their problem. The other extreme of that is, oh, I know it's too hard, so I'll sit with you and maybe we'll read all the chapters together and then I can help you take notes and then maybe we'll talk about, what the report should look like, and you're basically doing it for them, and that's very discouraging to children. It's okay for children to struggle just a little bit, especially when it comes to schoolwork or even just pulling on their shirt when they're little and they're learning how to dress themselves. They have to wriggle into it a little bit, but they're practicing. And as they do it more and more, they can master it. So that's kind of the thinking of it. And as I said before, sometimes very small changes like that, even when parents are having problems with a 4-year-old that's pushing back or a 14-year-old who's pushing back, when they can start to kind of equalize that power a little bit and let the child have some positive power, it's amazing how much more cooperative they become and how strengthened they feel. So they try even harder.
Wow. So that's very motivating to hear you say that because, this idea of letting them have some power and the idea of having them have some struggle, I think that isn't something that is just unique to children. That actually is something that I've studied a lot of this in terms of looking at how to motivate employees at work. And one of the things that I tell my coaching clients, as well as try to instill in my own workplace, is that you have to have constant challenge. You have to be solving problems in the course of your day. If you get to the point of thinking that something is rote, i.e., someone is telling you what to do all the time
Mm-hmm.
as a child, or someone is directing how things have to go in your workplace, and you don't really have any say, and you're just kind of there as an automaton, you lose interest very, very quickly. So I think that was a great point. And I will note that we now have some additional people on the line. We have Roshni who has a question, and her question is, how can I help my preschooler get comfortable sleeping alone in her own room. She's scared of the idea. I think that's a fabulous question, Roshni. Thank you so much for asking that. And Lisa, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it really, and this is a theme really for any age, any issue that you're dealing, but the most important thing is to take time for training. So training the child about what is it like to sleep alone, talking about the routine, having it all spelled out, and actually even maybe giving them a little bit of input into an acceptable bedtime routine. And then if you're in a pattern, all relationships are patterns of behavior. And, it's like a dance, one person goes left, the other one goes right. So as parents, the only thing we have control over is our behavior. So if we want to change the pattern in some way, we might have to change our behavior slightly, and then the next day change it slightly. So in terms of sleeping, it really takes kind of communicating about it, training about it, and then following really a systematic, okay, if the pattern is you're lying down with them, okay, I'll lie down with you for 15 minutes tonight, and then maybe 15 minutes the next night, then the next night 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes again, and then 5 minutes. So it's kind of a weaning process, and it's really reprogramming, and at the same time pouring on that encouragement of, I know you can do this, I know you can handle this. The biggest challenge is the consistency and not caving. And the research says if you cave 1 in 15 times, you've just trained the child that this is negotiable. This is, I can get what I want. So it's challenging. Nobody ever said parenting was going to be easy, right?
Well, that's a nice little pot shot.
Right.
No one said parenting was going to be easy.
No.
Because it's interesting that you say that the idea of caving, because the first thing that came to my mind is that, whenever you're trying to learn a new habit, we always talk about the idea that you shouldn't be making decisions when you're tired, when you're hungry, or when you are angry. And so we know that in terms of changing eating habits, you certainly don't want to wait until you're starving to make a choice about having the burger or having the fruit cake, or the fruit salad. So the same thing would apply with this. But of course, what happens? You're putting the child to bed. It's bedtime. You're tired. And the child is now fussy because you're trying to reorient their behavior, and you're trying to reprogram them into this new habit. And at some point, the parent loses their resolve. I've seen parents, tell me that they've fallen asleep in bed while their kid is supposed to be winding down, and they wake up and the kid is bouncing on the bed up and down while mom is knocked out. It's tough, but that was great advice about how to handle that. And so Roshni does thank you for that. We also have Dr. Carla Cook on the line. Dr. Cook is a psychologist. I recently had the joy of presenting with her to the New Jersey Coordinating Coalition about child abuse and neglect, particularly trauma in childhood. So, Dr. Cook, thank you for showing up. She says it's an important conversation with great commentary, so thank you for that. And for those that are just tuning in, you're watching Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. I am your host, Allison Williams, and tonight we have with us Lisa DiSciullo, who is a parenting coach. She's the owner and founder of Parenting Matters, which is an agency that offers parenting classes, and also Lisa is a parenting coach. So, Lisa, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. We've talked a lot about different issues that plague parents, and we have on the line people acknowledging what a great resource that you provide. So I'm very, very happy that you are here. For anyone that is watching and would like contact with you, your URL is parentingmattersnj.com, as spelled out, no dashes, no spaces, parentingmattersnj.com. We also have a comment from Judy Ann. Judy Ann notes that I don't have any young kids to parent anymore, but I think Lisa is sharing a lot of great information on parenting, and I could not agree more. So, Lisa, let me ask you this. You talked about the democratic parenting style, and so that clearly is what your preference is now for how you can give children the authority to start making some decisions on their own and growing healthy, that muscle of making decisions and exercising good judgment, but also recognizing their boundaries because they don't have life experience. So I would imagine that you see this problem of how to create a pattern in any type of change of human behavior,
Mhm.
but it's really, really difficult when you've got two individuals that are very different, because as we know, opposites attract. And so what happens when you have maybe a permissive parent and an authoritative parent, or when both of them are trying to work toward democratic style, but perhaps one is a little bit more attuned to the needs of the child than the other? What do you do when you have a one parent household versus a two parent household? How is that different?
Right. So it's there are a lot of complexities of that, and a lot of ways I can take that. But I very, very frequently see parents coming to me saying, "Well, I'm much more autocratic. I'm more comfortable there, and my spouse partner is very permissive." And what ends up happening is the autocratic one ends up saying, "Oh, he or she is so soft. I better get tougher." And then the permissive one is saying, "Oh, he or she is so tough. I better get softer." And so they're getting farther and farther away. So the great thing about parenting classes or talking to a parenting coach is it gives you the opportunity to take some time out of your busy schedule and focus on, first of all, what are our goals? What is it that we want? And have a conversation about that, have some language about that, have some common vocabulary. And then as well, and certainly in my classes, like, there's research and there's data and there's, proven strategies. And, I've had couples that, they consider the night of the class as their date night. They come to class and then they go out and have a glass of wine and talk about it. So they might not be on the same page from the get-go, but they're working toward getting on the same page and supporting each other in the process, which also strengthens their relationship. Now, when you have two households, so if they're separated or if they have gotten divorced and there's two separate households, the thing to remember is that, each parent will have an independent relationship with each child. And you have control over your relationship with your children. You don't really have control over the other person's relationship. So you can do what you can to try to influence that, but you don't necessarily have any control over that. So the best thing to do, and I even say this to people that live in the same house, but one person might be going to classes and the other one might not be, is just model and do your best to raise the children to be independent, resourceful themselves. And it's funny, what happens is that sometimes the other one sees the success you're having and it's kind of like, how do they do that? And can kind of start to get on board. And children are pretty smart. So they're going to know, like, I can do this at mom's house, because there's also this whole idea of training and, the way we do things and the routines are going to be different in two different houses. So I can do this at mom's house. I can't really do this at dad's house. They'll get that. And that's going to be part of their journey, is each individual relationship. And, that's how they'll be parented. They'll look back and say, my mom was like this, my dad was like that.
Yeah. So it's interesting that that you talk about the idea of it being okay to have two different styles and two different parents, and each has their own relationship. Because one of the things that we here at Williams Law Group deal with a lot is when you have custody and parenting time disputes, it oftentimes centers on the fact that one parent doesn't necessarily think that the other parent is toxic to the child. I mean, certainly we have that, but many, many times you have parents that say, it's just the fact that I know my child does best going to bed at a certain hour, or I know that my child does best having a structured time for homework, not in front of the TV, or I know that my child does best having social interaction over a shorter period of time because they don't get overstimulated, and the other parent just doesn't respect that. And when you have that difference, how does a parent who's really trying to create boundaries and structure and really yield to the needs of the child so that they can give the child the best experience to be their most successful self? How do you get there if you have a parent on the other side that's, really indifferent to it and is breaking the routine, because that routine can't be created, 5 days a week and shift on the weekends, or 3 days a week but be off 4 days a week and still be sustained?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. And I will share a little bit of my experience. I grew up in a single parent household, and so, I could see, that I had the different relationships I had with, my mother and my father. Um, the thing that I noticed as a kid is that sometimes the fighting that they were doing was really about them, not anything really to do about me. And so I guess that's really where I would challenge parents to really be questioning, is this really about making, the ex wrong? Or is it really about what's, for the good of the child? And that's just a genuine question one needs to be asking themselves. Um, and kids, there are going to be times they stay up too late and they're cranky the next day, and there are going to be times when they do their homework right on time. And the child will also start to learn from that experience as well. And you start to learn, oh yeah, when I do my homework on time, I get better grades, or I feel better in school, or I feel more successful. And, if I don't go to bed until too late, I'm really tired and cranky the next day. So, with very small children, they learn it a little more slowly, but as they get a little bit older, then, they're going to start to have a say in that also.
Oh, thank you. That's a great response. I recognize that we can't always solve all the problems for our clients, and that's one issue that we struggle with a lot. But letting the child kind of evolve into the person that they're going to be, notwithstanding those challenges. Just like everything else, challenges can make you stronger. So I do want to note, Lisa, that Dr. Cook knows that she loves your website, so she's already been on your website. So for anyone that's interested and you're just tuning in. You can find her website in our comments. We noted that it is parentingmattersnj.com, all spelled out, no spaces, no dashes, parentingmattersnj.com. And Roshni, who asked the question earlier, has another question. So thank you, Roshni, for following up. She asked, how can I help my child deal with a controlling friend who has turned into a bully? Now, that is a real important question because we know that bullying has become an issue that parents are
Mm-hmm.
grappling with and school systems are grappling with now. Not to go on a political rant, but we have obviously a different type of discourse coming out of our political leadership these days.
Mm-hmm.
And for better or for worse, it is kind of trickling down. So, how do you deal with that? What happens when there's a parent who's got a child who's being bullied by a friend? What advice do you give to a parent in that situation?
So in the situation of bullying, you kind of have the bullying and the victim, and then, you also have innocent bystanders as well, which right now we'll just talk about the victim and the bully. But the main thing to do for the victim is to build up their resilience skills. So help them get perspective on it. Teach them, especially a very young child, how to use their words, how to tune into their own feelings. And you can do that through some reflective listening, as a parent saying, oh, it looks like you're feeling very sad about that, or it looks like you're kind of mad at your friend for saying that kind of thing. Like, help them have some feeling vocabulary around it, and then be able to actually start saying some of those words. I don't like when you do that, or, that kind of thing. So the victim needs some coping skills and some assertiveness skills, to be able to stand up for themselves. On the other side, bullies tend to be very, very, very discouraged children who aren't feeling any power. And they probably don't have any power in their homes, or maybe they're neglected, or maybe there's some of that behavior being modeled at home. And it takes a village. If there's any opportunity, for adults, whether it's the parent of friends or teachers or counselors or whatever, to kind of tune into that child to help give them the encouragement they need to help strengthen their ability to have control over themselves and to have a little positive power, give them jobs in the classroom, that kind of thing. That will help the situation as well. It's a very, very big dilemma in our society right now. And I guess really the main thing I'll say is that I think the least effective solution is to punish anybody, punish the bully or punish the victim. Because it's, they're feeling bad already, and punishing is just going to make them feel worse. How could we, Jane Nelson of Positive Discipline says, where do we get the crazy idea in order to make children do better? We need to make them feel worse.
Mm.
So it's about encouragement and And also using your words and using good, clear communication skills and having courage to be able to speak up.
Now that has got to be a tough answer for a parent to digest. Because the first thing that, the first instinct of a parent is to protect their child. And so if child comes home and reports that little Susie on the playground is beating me up, many parents have the reaction of, all right, let me go talk to Susie's parents. There are some pathological people that would want to go talk to Susie. So luckily, we don't have a whole lot of that, but you do have that kind of, that tough role, that authoritative. I'm not going to be authoritative with my child. I'll be authoritative with your child. And I would imagine that a lot of parents really struggle with that from an issue of what do we do? I mean, I've had clients that have actually moved their child out of a different, into a different school district just to avoid the bully child because the school district wasn't doing enough, or the school district overreacted and removed the child, and now others have become the surrogate for that child, and taken on the bullying role. So Roshni does note that they were best friends and family friends, and I've asked my child to stay away for now, but I was hoping to make her stronger as her confidence dropped since then. And bolstering self-esteem in a child is definitely a responsibility of a parent. So Roshni, I applaud you for having that instinct. Lisa, what would you say about that for someone who really wants to instill positive self-esteem in a child that has been bullied?
So, it's important to focus on, not how powerless are you and what can't you do about this being a victim of the situation, but what are the things you can do? And one of the things you can do is play somewhere else on the playground, or if it's a family situation, play with the other kids that are there, or in Roshni's situation, maybe arrange it so that they don't get together as often, or and help the child with the reasons for that. And then also help the child know that, the kinds of things she wants to do and she wants to play and who she wants to play with are her choices. And you might as well play with somebody that you're having fun with. There's no reason to feel like somebody else has power over you. You can choose to go elsewhere.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Really giving your child knowledge that they have choices, because they oftentimes don't realize how much power that they really do have to make positive choices for themselves, notwithstanding their circumstances. So, for those of you that are just tuning in, we are here tonight with Lisa DiSciullo. Lisa is a parenting coach. She owns the company Parenting Matters, which offers parenting classes as well as parenting coaching. Parenting coaching is something that I have only recently learned about, but I'm very impressed with what Lisa has had to offer us in terms of her insights. Roshni does say thank you for your insights. And for those of you that have enjoyed the live tonight, gotten a lot of value out of it, please share it so that other people can become aware of how to get a hold of Lisa DiSciullo. And Lisa, with that, we're coming to the close of our hour. So I want to just ask you, if people want more information about how to get a hold of you and to work with your company, getting advice and resources for being better parents, where can they find you? How do they reach out?
Okay, well, you've mentioned my website, parentingmattersnj.com. I also have a business page on Facebook, and I have a profile on LinkedIn as well. It's a little challenging to spell my last name, so DiSciullo. And I do also I send out parenting tips every Friday morning. So if anybody would like to be on my email list, on the bottom of the first page of my website, there's a place to subscribe there. I also offer a free introductory program that goes over some of the things that we talked about in terms of societal changes, but really gets down to some very specific tools that you can use right away. And I have 2 of those sessions coming up in July in Summit. Those are also listed on my website. That program is called Why Don't My Kids Listen to Me?
Ah.
And as I said, it's a free program, a free introductory program. And I also, for people that are interested in coaching, offer a free consultation on the phone. Most of my coaching is done on the phone or via Skype or Zoom. So if parents are interested in talking directly to me, they can find out through my website or email me through my website.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your information, your wealth of information tonight. I think we actually did have someone that mentioned earlier your free introductory course. And so that is a great way for people to get a sense of what it is to be to work with a parenting coach. But not just any parenting coach. I just really want to applaud you, Lisa, for what I think has just been exceptional information. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. Elaretha said this was great. Thank you to you and to me. And Dory also notes, great session, ladies. Thanks. Thank you again, Roshni, for asking insightful questions that I'm sure are going to help not only you, but also our listeners. And you are watching tonight Moving Families Forward with Williams Law Group. I am your host, Allison Williams. You'll see us again next Monday, same time, same place on our Facebook page, Williams Law Group, or rather, the Williams Law Group. That's how we're on Facebook. And you can always tune in to get more information, insights, help about how to move your family forward in this day and age. I want to thank you again to our parenting coach, Lisa DiSciullo, and everyone out there in Facebook world and elsewhere. Have a great night.
Thank you very much.